Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Dragon Dreams. So, uh, today I'm going to be talking about specialist classes in the BECMI version of Dungeons and Dragons. My name is Ivan, and in case you don't know what BECMI is, it stands for Basic, Expert, Companion, Master, and the Immortals box sets. Which form one of the versions of D&D from the 1980s. So BECMI spells out BECMI. And BECMI is bar none my favorite version of D&D ever. If for no other reason than that it's the black sheep of the D&D family. And it has some unusual takes on a lot of things. And it really makes it different, and it stands out to me as something special. It's also what I came up on. And so to me, this is what D&D meant back when I was first introduced to it. So a lot of people don't know this, like even people I know who are huge BECMI enthusiasts don't actually realize that there are these specialist classes that certain main classes can access at 9th level. Lawful fighters can become paladins. Chaotic fighters can become Avengers, or anti-paladins, as they're known in other versions of the rules. All fighters can become knights. Neutral clerics can become druids. I mention this because I think this is something that is kind of an unknown thing. You know, I don't hear very many people talking about it. And I think it's kind of a unique thing. It's very BECMI. So it may be tempting to think of these in terms of other versions of D&D because paladins and druids have been around since the beginning. I mean, since like AD&D first edition. Well, not beginning, but whatever, 1979 or something like that. So we sort of think, well, isn't this just the same thing? Well, no, it's not. It's apples and oranges. And here's why. If you think about it, there's a huge difference between starting out as a paladin or a druid or anti-paladin at first level and having those be classes that could only be accessed at 9th level. I mean, imagine the church has like this elite unit of paladins ready to, charge out and defend against evil. I mean, that would friggin' scare me if I was a bad guy, because every single one of these great warriors thundering on horseback and full suits of armor with cleric spells and turn undead at their disposal are gonna be 9th level or above, which is a force to be reckoned with. Also, think about druids. Druids in Celtic mythology are really, really incredible people. They are not. It's like I don't know of any Celtic myths that have like low powered druids, people who just became druids. I mean, you don't just become a druid. You study for decades. It's like becoming a Jedi or something like that. Except you're not a warrior. You're a holy person. But these are like these holy people who don't just worship the Celtic gods. They are masters of, the deep hidden knowledge of nature that they can harness. I mean, these are, not just ordinary people. And I think even in a fantasy world, there's something to be said for the idea that this is an elite version of a holy person. So I think that in BECMI, there's really kind of a different sense that some of the basic classes like fighters, thieves, clerics, and magic users are kind of like something just about anybody can be. But that paladins and avengers and druids, there's also knights, which I haven't mentioned so far, which I'm going to go through as well. are elite types that are out there in the world, but they're really more like, as I said, kind of like the Jedi or Sith of the fantasy world. In other words, they are these guys that, you don't expect like an ordinary person to meet. They might go through their whole life not ever having met one. And that's a really different take on things. Okay, so let's dive in. So I'm going to use the Rules Cyclopedia, which came out in, I think it was 89, which is a summary of the BECMI rules. I mentioned this because for some of the purists out there, some people like to know there's subtle differences apparently between the box sets and the Rules Cyclopedia. I believe these same rules are also in the companion set, possibly the master set. All right, so before I dive into the specialist classes, though, let me talk about what normally happens. Like, what if you don't switch? Okay, so if you're a fighter, you become a lord or a lady. Basically, the ruler of whatever realm you're in would have heard of your great deeds and would give you, some little territory, like some land, and you could build a stronghold on it. Actually, technically, I believe fighters can begin building their strongholds before 9th level if they have enough money to do it. But at 9th level, they get a ton of followers. I think like more followers than any other class gets. And this is almost like a tiny army. I think they maybe get like dozens or maybe even like 100 or more followers. So it's kind of like they have their own little micro private army that they can do things with, which is really kind of cool. But if they specialize to become paladins, avengers, or knights, they do not get this status. They do not get to become lords, and they don't get the same kinds of followers. They have much more limited followers. Okay. For a cleric, if they do not choose to become a druid, and remember that druids are only available to neutral clerics, not to lawful and chaotic clerics, they normally become patriarchs or matriarchs at 9th level. Now, in old versions of D&D, BX, BECMI, AD&D First Edition, and I think even some of the earlier versions from the 70s, they did something that was kind of neat that I don't see them doing anymore, which is that the levels had titles, which sort of means that you can have a description of your character, you can have a sense of the status of your character in the milieu of that class or that occupation. And so clerics start out as like acolytes or something like that, and then I think they become like deacons or something later on. And later on they become like priests, right? And then like later on they become bishops. And patriarchs and matriarchs are maybe kind of like archbishops or even cardinals in our world. In fact, in our world we actually have a religion that has patriarchs in it, and that's Orthodox Christianity. I believe that like the top level people, like the head of like all Russian Orthodox or the head of all Greek Orthodox is actually called a patriarch. So I think that's actually where they get those terms from. So the idea is that you're so important in your church by the time you reach 9th level that you are given broad powers by your church to administrate your religion in a major area, like maybe an entire country or something like that, or an entire section of a country if there's already a patriarch or matriarch for the whole country. So that is what you would be giving up if you're neutral and you choose to become a druid. If you become a druid, they don't quite say this. We've had some discussion on some of the BECMI Facebook groups, but and some people say there might be like orders within a religion that allows neutral clerics that are druidic orders, and other people say no, the druids are like a separate group that are like completely outside of the religion. It's a different religion. But I think basically the idea is that it's like you leave the normal church institution, you go out into the woods, and there's like these people living out in nature called druids, and they train you. And so you leave behind the brick and mortar churches and the holy orders of your religion and become something very different. So we're going to get into that. So let's jump in to these 4 specialty classes. First, paladins. Okay, so as I've already said, paladins are available to lawful fighters of 9th level or higher, and they have to have a wisdom of 13 plus. Okay, technically the rules say that they don't have to have the wisdom of 13 plus, but they also say you don't get any cleric spells ever. No matter how high level you are, you don't get those cleric spells if you don't have a wisdom of 13 plus. So I can't imagine anybody taking on a paladin who doesn't have a wisdom of 13 plus. Like, why would you do that? I wouldn't do that. And so I'm just going to say 13 plus. Okay. You can detect evil as often as once per round simply by declaring it, but it is your action. You cannot say like attack on the same round that you do a detect evil. But still, that is really pretty freaking powerful, particularly because in BECMI there's the 3 alignment system: lawful, neutral, and chaotic. Lawful skews good, but is not necessarily good. Chaotic skews evil, but is not necessarily evil. Detect evil, and there's been a ton of discussion on this on BECMI group sites, detects evil intent, not evil alignment, because there is no alignment called evil. But that's pretty powerful, because it means if somebody's about to ambush you and you declare that you detect evil, you just automatically know there's evil up ahead. You don't know what it is, but you know there's evil up ahead, you know. They also have the powers of a cleric of 1/3 their level rounded down, so they can turn undead and cast cleric spells. They keep their normal fighter hit points, and they can use all the same weapons and armor and fighter skills and everything, weapons mastery and all that kind of stuff from a fighter, but they can use turn undead and cleric spells of 1/3 their level. The one disadvantage to being a paladin is that you have to serve your church, because you're a member of some sort of chivalric order that's like a order of holy knights, and you report to the church. Okay. Avengers. All right, Avengers are almost identical to paladins, except they're chaotic, so they're like, you know, inverse paladins. Obviously you have to be a chaotic fighter with a wisdom of 13 plus. They serve a chaotic church or religion. They can also turn undead and cast cleric spells as a cleric of 1/3 their level. Again, that is rounded down. But when they turn undead, they can use it to control undead if they have a T or a D in the turn undead. Like, in other words, if it's automatic, which is cool. Like, I think that's kind of cool and scary. The other thing, and this is something I haven't seen anywhere else, as far as I know, maybe it is, but when they go into like a monster's lair, monsters who are chaotic have to give them shelter. Like, it's like they have to like extend hospitality to them. They have to, like, you know, give you something to eat, something to drink, and give you a place to sleep at night, which is so cool. Like, how cool is that? Like imagine, like, you go into a dungeon, and instead of like the normal dungeon crawl routine, we're like, oh, there's a bunch of hobgoblins, let's kill them. You're like, hello, hobgoblins. I'm an Avenger. I'm a member of this unholy order of, like, the, you know, wicked, you know, whatever, dark, you know, whatevers, right? Like, and by the rules of our religion, I demand that you give me shelter. And the hobgoblins are like, okay, sure, here's a, you know, nasty, smelly little bed that you can sleep in, but come by and drink ale with us, and, you know, like, maybe even become our leader, because, hey, we're just hobgoblins, you know? Like, that's cool. I think Avengers make the perfect villains, and I also think they'd be a ton of fun to play, even though, you know, a lot of people are kind of like, play good characters because we want to do good. It's an option, you know, that you can play as a PC. And I think that's just really neat, because it changes the whole dynamics of a dungeon or your typical adventure of good versus evil. And then finally we get knights. Now, knights don't get the same kinds of amazing powers. They feel to me very much like real medieval knights. They serve an actual titled aristocrat, like a baron or baroness or a duke or duchess, or even it could even be a king or a queen, as elite warriors, just like their real medieval counterparts. Their main advantage is that when they travel around the setting, other lords and ladies, or kings and queens or whatever, have to put them up in their castles for the night. And I think that's really fun. Like, I think that's really kind of cool that that's their special power. Because that's like a social power. It's like so rarely do characters have powers that have to do with the setting. It's so often that they, like I sort of feel like one reason why I actually have gone away from 5e personally and gone toward old versions of D&D is because I feel like 5e to me feels too much like Wizards of Warcraft or something. In other words, it's like a video game. It's like playing a computer game. It's all about powers. And what's really neat about BECMI, I think, is that there's this very down-to-earth sense to it. There's a sense to which it almost is a low fantasy game. So there's a sense to which it's almost like, they're looking at what are the different possibilities here for something that feels realistic. Of course, paladins and avengers and druids don't feel so realistic, but they're elites. Knights are more like your kind of more realistic feeling option for a fighter at 9th level. And so I really kind of like that. I think that's actually kind of neat, and I would seriously consider becoming a knight. Like, I think being a knight would be awesome. Like, I've always wanted to be a knight back when I was a little kid. I think it's like that's what I used to play when we played, make-believe and stuff, was a knight. So I would totally become a knight. I think it would be great. But you do have to obey, the lord or lady that you're sworn to serve. So, bear that in mind. But presumably, I mean, if I were DMing, I would definitely make it so that you also have, like, a ton of resources as well. Like, it's not just... Because I want to balance them a little bit against paladins and avengers, who obviously are more powerful in some ways. And so I would definitely say, like if you have, like, some baron or earl or count or duchess or whoever that you serve, you have, like, their whole castle and all their lands and everything at your disposal, which probably means you could, like, walk up to the castle armorer and just be like, hey, make me a sword, or I guess armorers make armor. Like, hey, make me plate mail, or make me a suit of armor or something. I'm a knight of the Duchess, and they're like, yes, sir, right away. So there you go. Okay, and finally we get to druids. To be a druid, you have to be a neutral cleric. And as I've said, I've kind of described the process that it was like, you don't fit in anymore with the conventional church. You're either there's a special order within your church, or some say there's a separate druid religion. The rules say that you come to worship Mother Nature instead of one of the immortals. You get a druid teacher out in the woods. You're actually living out in nature somewhere, not in town. So it's like, think like Yoda, except druid, not Jedi. And that's kind of like what your teacher is. And here's the thing that's awesome about BECMI druids. They can cast both cleric and druid spells. Okay, how cool is that? Now, they cast them off the same chart. So, like, if you cast a druid spell, of course, that's going to be taken off. Like, let's say you cast a second level druid spell, right? Like, that gets taken off the number of second level spells you can cast. And then you cast a cleric spell of second level, that gets taken off again from that same chart. But you have, like, more spells, and the spells are cool. There's spells like heat metal. Eventually you're going to get the infamous lightning strike, which is a really powerful spell. Definitely I think it's worth playing in druid. You do not get turn undead. Also, your armor and weapons options become more limited, as do your possessions, because you cannot use metal. You cannot own things that are made of metal. Everything that you own has to be like all natural. It could be like wood, leather, stone, stuff like that. So you can use slings, you can use staves, you can wear leather armor. So it's a little bit of a downgrade in terms of combat, and definitely in terms of the undead, but it's a major upgrade in terms of the spells that are available to you. And that's really kind of a different take from AD&D, because, and I think the druids going forward, because first of all, it means that you can still be the party healer, which I think is great. In AD&D, they first edition, they kind of had that, where I think you can cast Cure Light Wounds at like second level instead of first level, so you can kind of like do double duty, but you still want a cleric in your party. I think one thing that's really neat about druids is that the druid can do it for the healer in the party. Not the undead defender, but hey, maybe the fighter will become a paladin, and your cleric will become a druid, and they'll balance each other out. And they also are required to follow a certain ethos of druidism. Okay. And a few final things to kind of wrap this up in terms of what you get and don't get as you progress from there, from any of these specialty classes. Paladins can only take a number of followers equal to their cleric level, meaning starting at 9th level, you can only take 3 because you're equivalent of a 3rd level cleric. Obviously, when you get to, like 30th level, which in BECMI it goes up all the way to 36, obviously you could go up to 10, right? That's very limited compared to a fighter. Avengers can only take, I think they can actually get like monsters. They can actually approach monsters and try to get them as followers, which I think is awesome. Like, something so, I love Avengers, and so it shivers up my spine. Not only are they make great NPCs as like the ultimate villain of the game, but I think it would be so fun to play one, because even though it might vex the DM, because you'd be like walking into the DM's carefully laid out dungeons and be like, hey, put me up for the night. Hey, Mr. Monster or Ms. Monster, like, be my follower, and you could like go around collecting these baddies and like having them serve the party. I think that's really a ton of fun. Okay, so I'd like to give my thoughts at this point. My thoughts on this, first of all, I think that this is a really fun and unique idea. To me, this is just tremendous, because it's a different approach to character advancement. It basically is saying that, there are certain basic classes that cover the sort of basic types of things that a starting level character might reasonably be. And if you think about it, to me, fighters, magic users, thieves, and clerics for humans covers that pretty well. Like, fighters would be anything from like gladiators to guards to, soldiers. Thieves could be anything from like, thief guild thieves to, just wandering happy-go-lucky pilferers, burglars, cut purses, what have you. You could probably even play a thief as a non-criminal. Like, they actually have rules in one of the gazetteers for the Phaeacian Empire. There's actually a subclass of thief called a rake, which is like a non-criminal. They're more like swashbucklers. And then magic users are your standard, like magic character, wizards and whatnot. And, clerics are like your standard holy person. And those pretty much cover your bases. And I think that BECMI has a very down-to-earth feel to things. But there's a sense to which, as you advance, you get more things that change your character development. You can go up through 5 levels of weapons mastery. You start getting more skills if you're using the rules cyclopedia. So if you wanted to play a ranger type, you can play a fighter with nature skills, for example. If you wanted to play like a wandering minstrel, you could play like a thief. Like a bard type character, you could play a thief who has some performance skills, like they can play a musical instrument and sing, and maybe know some ancient epics. Maybe they travel from village to village, performing at the local taverns, and then picking some pockets on the side, or robbing a townhouse, when they come through a city, as a way to supplement their income. But I feel like what they're implying with this is that as you advance, as you go from just being kind of normal starting characters with certain professions to being heroes who have been going on adventures for quite a while, who have been renowned for defeating monsters, for stopping evil plots, then the great orders of the world start taking notice of you. If you're a lawful fighter, like maybe, like the elite knights of the church, maybe approach you and be like, have you considered, won't you fight for us, become a paladin, join the secret order of paladins within the church and fight evil, or, whatever. Or the druids approach you and be like, hey, like we've been living in the forest, we've been watching you from the woods all this time, serving as a humble cleric, and all these great deeds that you've been doing, and join our secret order. Like it's a different approach to things, because it's not so much that you have a lot of options when you're a starting character. It's more like there's an emphasis on character advancement more than an emphasis on character generation. Character generation is simple. Character advancement allows you to branch out, and I think that's a really neat idea. If I were DMing, I would probably allow this at a lower level, possibly 4th, because, like, I can't remember the last time I was in a campaign where I made it to 9th level, and I think one reason why so few people know these rules, even major BECMI enthusiasts, is because they just don't get to 9th level in their campaigns. And 4th level seems like a really great level to shoot for. It's a level that you're probably going to get to in a campaign of a reasonable length, but it's not too low. So if your goal is to become a paladin or to become a druid, it's achievable rather than having to wait till 9th level and then having the campaign fizzle out from under you. Also, the cutoff from the basic box set to the expert box set is 4th level. So 4th level is when you start, like, if you got it back in the 80s, you couldn't go past 3rd level with the basic set. You had to buy the expert set to continue. So 4th level seems like an obvious cutoff point. My other criticism of this is that it's like 2 of the 4 major classes have specialty classes they can switch to, but the other 2, thieves and magic users, do not. Also, clerics who are not neutral do not. So it's a little weird. It's kind of like they had a neat idea and then they didn't fill out everything. So in my next video, I plan to muse on some homebrews that a DM could do to kind of like make a fix for this. In other words, I think there's kind of a sense to which, maybe wizards and thieves could have comparable specialist classes. And I also think maybe, I'm going to muse on, lawful and chaotic clerics and what they might do as well. So I'd like to find out what you think in the comments. And particularly, have you played a fighter or a cleric who you raised to 9th level in BECMI and then switched to one of these classes, and what was your experience? If you've enjoyed this video, please like it and consider subscribing to my channel so you won't miss videos when they come out and you'll be the first to know. And until then, happy dreaming, everybody. All right.